This week on the Yoke Strength podcast, we are stoked to bring on Harry Walker. Describing a guest is usually a simple task, but for Harry, that goes out the window completely. He's a strength coach, Wildland firefighter, Strongman athlete, Army National Guard soldier, and a United States Marine Corps veteran. Throughout the episode, we talk about concurrently balancing the physical demands of all these responsibilities, competing in various competitions around the world, as well as some light philosophical topics. This was an awesome episode that displays how taking on challenges leads to meaningful work. As always, thanks for listening and enjoy the episode.
Before we hit the intro music, I wanted to introduce to you guys the Yoke Strength Insider. The Yoke Strength Insider is our online training platform that takes all of the ideas that we talk about on this podcast and implements them into a program that is available to you at the touch of your fingers. Our goal with the Yoke Strength Insider is to create better movers, to level up your life, and to move forward from where you are. We do this in a holistic fashion. Not only will you receive a program that has helped hundreds of people become better movers, you'll also receive access to our app that allows you to track everything, has video links for all exercises, and allows you to be in constant communication with a Yoke Strength coach. Along with this, you'll get our 30-page PDF nutrition and lifestyle guidelines. That includes everything from what to eat, how much of it to eat, why we're eating it, meditation habits, and other lifestyle habits that we implement with our clients to really level up their lives. If you're interested in trying out one of these programs, use podcast 25 in the discount section right before you pay for 25% off your first program. Boom.
This is the Yoke Strength Podcast. Take the leap down the rabbit hole with us as we interview elite level guests to unravel what high performance really is.
All right, well, Coach, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to have you here.
Hey, thanks, man. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, Tristan was talking about the trifecta of things that you do and things that he was interested in having you on. And when you look at your page, man, you have a multitude of someone's maybe like a multiple personality strength conditioning disorder we got going here. Like you have so
Definitely
many
disorder.
and so many different avenues of like physical development and physical things that you're pursuing and getting after. And not only getting after, like I think you have like the hybrid athlete kind of world now where it's just like a bunch of average like Joes. Like you are reaching the top percentage in all of these things. And I think it's super cool just to see somebody that's just an absolute unit in a lot of different like avenues. And I'm interested in like, how did you get started in physical development in general? I know we had like the military background, we have some firefighting, but like, was it all to prep for that? Did you have a background before that? Like, what was the original journey and maybe like the gateway drug to getting into some of this fitness stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is something I like talking about. I would say I first really started getting involved in the interest in like strength conditioning and strength culture when I was in high school. You know, because growing up as a kid, I think, especially growing up as a kid in the '90s, you know, you have exposure to all those crazy action movies with like Arnold and Stallone. So there's in the comic book, so there's always that part which kind of like sparks the interest. But I started playing rugby my freshman year of high school. And up until that point, I just kind of like played soccer as a kid. And rugby was this really like brutal physical sport. But the people playing it were really nice, which is this cool juxtaposition. And I kind of realized after that first season, because I was a very small kid, I was like, okay, I think I really want to keep doing the sport. I want to get good at it. What is, you know, the things that I need to do to increase my proficiency? And luckily, there was a connection in the apartment complex we lived in for someone who was like a strength conditioning coach at Boston University. And they were like, hey, we have a youth athletic program. So I started doing that. And through that, I realized really quickly, you know, because I wasn't naturally athletic, I wasn't naturally skilled, but I realized basically within 1 year of doing that, I was like, oh, if I just work hard in the weight room, that's going to have a tremendous carryover, you know, pretty quickly to these attributes I need for rugby. And so I just fell in love with it because I could see like, oh, if I just work hard, then like, you know, these transferable gains are going to be so quick on the field. And through that, and through having some really good early mentors, I started reading like Elite FTS, which is like a great powerlifting platform. And I started, didn't really get into the bodybuilding stuff, but I started going like way back and reading about like George Hackenschmidt, who's kind of like one of the earlier like strongmen. And I started like really learning more about the early strength culture and how it came to the US and where it came from. And so I got like a cool first exposure, and I started incorporating that kind of stuff into my training, like stuff with like thick ropes, doing like drags, doing pull-ups, doing building like sandbags out of the old like military style duffel bags.
And
You
this was all
know,
still in high school?
this is all in high school, yeah.
That's badass.
Yeah, and I was really lucky. I had a great group of friends. One of them, one of their dads owned a gym, and we would basically just, if I wasn't playing rugby, we would just go and we would just like lift after school every day, and we were trying all kinds of crazy stuff. But yeah, I was lucky with the group of friends I have because we were all pushing each other and we were all really interested. And then, yeah, that's kind of like what the initial spark was. And then that stuff kind of naturally progressed into getting ready for the military. It just had a really good carryover. And so I kind of saw, I had a great athletic background with rugby, which helped out a lot. I ended up playing like 12 years of it total. But yeah, the stuff in the weight room and the initial interest and kind of like the history of strength sport and strength culture is what I really like nerded out on.
Yeah, and there was a video of you. It looks like you were overseas. You were training on Jailhouse Strong, like doing some training. Like, well, it looked like were you deployed in that video?
Yeah, is it the one? Is it the one with the sandbag, or is it the one where I'm like
You like threw like a
lifting
shot put
bricks and?
rock and like jumped onto a truck.
Oh yeah, that was like recently when I was deployed in Africa. Because I've done that on pretty much every deployment. Is wherever I get to, I kind of see what's available to me, and yeah, just assemble a weight room out of whatever. My Marines and I would always, doing training when we get to the field. One thing I would always love to bring is just those like empty loadable sandbags because that's like, it packs up real small and flat into your ruck so you could carry around with you. And then when you're stopping somewhere forever long, you just fill it up with rocks and sand and you have like a mobile gym. So we would build, ghetto gyms, just have sandbags and rocks and whatever pieces of metal, whatever we could find. And that's like the cool thing about the military, which kind of connected to the strongman piece is like, yeah, you just figure out what's around you, what you have. Like you always have your body, which is, your ultimate, piece of equipment. But then, you can, the only thing that limits you is your own creativity and your own knowledge about what stuff you can build.
So, as Austin mentioned, is and kind of as you've alluded to, is you have a lot of different things going on. Would you be able to tell us about some of those? Like, we obviously heard
Yeah,
military, but from just the page, I saw military, athlete, coach, strongman, firefighter. It just seems like there's a lot. And I think it'd be pretty interesting to hear just a little bit about all those three and how they tie, or all of them and how they tie together.
for sure. I'll give like a really quick kind of timeline of all those things and kind of when they all started. So we already talked about rugby. I started that in high school, and then I continued that in college, and I continued it in the Marine Corps. I was in the Marine Corps from 2014 to 2018. And then I had a year break in service. And during that break in service, I went over to South Africa and I did anti-poaching for 2 deployments. So I was protecting like elephants and rhino. And then after that, I joined Army Special Forces. And actually, sorry, there was a gap there. So that I did anti-poaching, and then I did a season of Wildland fire. I showed up to do my criticals, which is like the 2 weeks you do before you get certified. I got certified, and then I went to Army Special Forces selection. I took a little bit of time off. I passed there, luckily, and then like less than a week later, I was back fighting fire on a mountain outside of Las Vegas, eating MREs again. I was like, oh, I thought I was done with all of this. So I did that full season of fire, and then I went to my Special Forces training. And then because I did it through the Guard, I'm able to have a civilian career and the military stuff. So I kind of like every other year I would do deployment or whatever, and then a fire season. Um, and then throughout that time, as I was getting out of the Marine Corps, that's when I started competing in strongman. So I'd already kind of started training that well for a while, that way for a while. And then I started competing in 2018. And since 2018, I've done 64 competitions. So in some way, in some years, that was like, you know, a competition every month or more. And if you think about it, if you detract the amount of time that I've been away on deployments and training, that's actually like more. So I obviously love to compete, and I love the carryover Strongman has to all those other things.
So with all those different demands, obviously like being big and strong is pretty beneficial to most things in life, besides maybe pure distance running or something. But
Right.
how do like the physical capabilities, the trainings, balance with each other between all of these? Obviously, if we're focusing on pure strongman, like
Mhm.
that's going to be different than being a capable wildland firefighter.
Yeah, absolutely. Because wildland firefighters really are endurance athletes. And me coming in being a little bit bigger, and this also just comes to me understanding my body. Like, I'm one of those people who, doesn't put on size and strength, very easily. I've always been kind of like more of an endurance athlete build, that kind of thing. And so because of that, like I knew that I could gain size and strength, but I knew I could also lose it very quickly. And so it worked out for wildland fire season. Like my first season, I lost something like 22 pounds just from the exposure of the amount of running and hiking we were doing. Um, and so I knew that for me, it was important. I mean, there's a quote that I like, which is strength is never a weakness. And that being like, if you're building a high degree of base strength, that's going to translate to everything else you're doing. I mean, like I've run 2 marathons without training for either, at above 200 pounds, and because the transference effect of that. Granted, I'm not running world record times or anything, but I think the difference between doing that versus like I think like a strongman or could have a high degree of strength, go run a marathon, be fine. You might not be able to do the same thing as like a high level marathon runner and go be able to do a strongman contest. Like you probably wouldn't be able to move some of the weights. So I've always thought that the strength has a great transference. And that's also, there's also myself as the specific example, knowing that I drop weight and size really quickly when I start, having that high exposure to the running and hiking. So I always knew I could be okay, start working a wildland season. That being said, I remember showing up to my first season of wildland, and I had had a lot of experience hiking with like a heavy rock on my back. I was in the Marine Corps infantry. When I showed up there and I saw how good and capable wildland athletes are at like hiking at speed with weight, like at elevation, I was blown away because I thought I was like a good hiker. And then, the first crew hike we did in Vegas, which is called Little T, it's like 1,000 feet of elevation gain in less than a mile. Um, I remember seeing how fast some of those guys did that, and I was blown away. So uh, when I talk about these things, like, yeah, I'm not great at any one thing. I'm just like well rounded. There's people who are absolutely exceptional at all these different things that I do. I'm just like the jack of all trade who likes to do them all.
When you're doing all this stuff, how are you like what's the training look like to stay healthy? Like because you have a high demand
Yeah.
of life, and then when your life demand isn't high with all of your like activities that you're doing, then you're competing like you're saying 64 times, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
how are you training to one make progress towards these things without also like not snapping yourself in half?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think I've been very lucky in my life. I've never had a very serious injury. I broke a hand when I was really little, and then I've like torn a groin playing rugby. But outside of that, I actually attribute quite a lot of it to a lot of the strongman style training I've done because it puts you in a lot of dynamic positions. There's a lot of moving, there's a lot of stabilization in odd positions, loaded spinal flexion, picking up sandbags, picking up rocks. And I think having exposure to that and training that way kind of like year round has actually helped with my injury prevention a lot because it's just putting me in challenging positions, weighted mobility, that kind of thing. And then it's also understanding because as like a tactical athlete, there's no off season, right? You always have to be ready to do whatever the task is. And so, yeah, staying healthy is the top performance quality. And so for me, I'm very reliant on like the RPE system. It's very rare. Well, I'll do like a percentage just because like, hey, I could have just been on a patrol for X amount of hours, and if I was doing percentage work, I'm like, okay, now I have to hit this 90 something percent deadlift, but I'm like, dude, I was just up all night patrolling around in like the jungle or the woods. Like there's no way that I can hit that. So, very, very intuitive with how your body feels, and then understanding like the difference between like what your body wants to do, what your mind wants to do, not tying an emotional experience to like wanting to get a certain amount of weight or do something, and understanding like, hey, I know I want to do this and I've done this before, but yeah, man, like I didn't sleep last night and my body feels like crap. So I really have to be intelligent about this. So it's tough. I've had some hard lessons and picked up some injuries, but from that, learned really quickly, like, okay, the way I approach this has to be smarter.
One of the things that you glanced over so quickly was preparing for wildland firefighter season, going to selection, which for people who don't know, it's a very challenging, 3 weeks about time frame, and then
Yep.
going straight back into a wildland firefighter scene. All my friends who ever went to selection have been pretty beat up and pretty beat down after that. And I can't imagine starting what is supposed to be a very grueling and hard season after doing that. Do you have any like
Well,
insight
even
into
the
that?
rugged the wildlife fire, what was he was calling it Hell Week for wildlife firefighting too. Like, did you have
Yeah,
to go
Oh,
straight from
criticals.
selections into
criticals.
this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it called?
Criticals. Yeah. Criticals. It's your like 2 week period on the
Yes,
front end
yeah,
of the
you were just
season where
talking
you're
about this.
you're doing like you're doing like PT twice a day. Usually we would do like a run and a hike and maybe like a weight circuit. And you're doing all your classes and you're learning how to use the chainsaw, you're going out and cutting on project. I actually think that helped me a lot going to selection because, I had been doing my own running and hiking up until that point, a lot with the ruck, but I was still like a little bit heavier. And so there's actually like a couple of things that helped me out was going to criticals, and like I lost some weight there. So my run times just went down a little bit just because, I wasn't dealing with body weight. And then it was during COVID. And so when we got out there, we had to, so instead of it being like normal 3 weeks, like you said, like I think I was out there like almost like 5 or 6 because of all this COVID stuff going on. So I got out there and we had to test and then show that we didn't have COVID so we could start. But we weren't allowed in the chow hall, so we were just eating MREs. And anyone doesn't know who MREs are, they are military like packaged food, meals ready to eat. They're supposed to be pretty calorie dense, but they're not a very high quality of food. But they get the job done. It's what you carry in your ruck when you're doing operations, and you can live off these things. So I only ate those for the first week. So I dropped some more weight, and got like a little acclimated. And then yeah, did the selection, and then had to wait like another week on the back end. And then I thought I was done with MREs, and then by the time I was done, I'm out on a fire and I'm eating more MREs. But I actually think that critical period before selection actually helped because it made me drop some more weight because we were just working so hard, and we were out here in Vegas and I was just sweating. So I dropped more weight, and then it helped me run like a pretty fast time on my Army fitness test. And then I think the reason, because yeah, selection beats you up. Usually team week is where guys get beat up, which is basically a little shorter than a week where you do a series of team-based events, usually consisting of you're given kind of like a mission. You're given a map, and then you're given a collection of equipment, ranging from all kinds of stuff like telephone poles, sandbags with weights, broken vehicle parts. And you have to figure out a way to move all this stuff with the guys that you have from point A to point B. Usually it's for an unknown time and an unknown distance. And you do that many times throughout the day and the week and pays to be a winner. If you do it fast, you get more sleep. If you show up and you have 30 minutes until the next thing, you sleep for 30 minutes and then you go again for the entire next day. So that's usually where guys get beat up. I think I was set up for success with that because for me, it just felt like strongman marathon, and I was like, oh, I know how to do this. I know how to put a telephone pole on my back and I know how to, carry this thing. And so, I think, the way I trained had me be a little bit more robust for that, which helped out with the injury prevention piece. And then, yeah, by the time I was done, I was in great firefighting shape. I'd been rucking and running a lot and walking through the woods, so I was ready to get out there and fight some fire. I was looking a little skinny, but that's okay. It's good for wildland fire.
And so one of my other questions that I have on top of that is how do you manage? I think I saw a post the other day that you had of places I've programmed from, and it was like, like a rusty
I
like
saw that one too.
school in the middle of the desert or something.
Yeah,
It was like,
yeah.
so how do you find time for coaching, programming on top of all that? When did that start? And it seems like it's not just you, like you have like a whole team for it.
hmm Yeah. I started really having to make some of those considerations um, basically before I went to that selection that fire season because I really had to think ahead. I was like, okay, I'm obviously going to be unavailable for this amount of time. What's that going to mean for my clients? How can I still help them out? So during periods of that kind of stuff where I know I'm going to be away, I'll usually pre-program, which obviously you lose the ability to get that individual customization change from week to week, but it's like your 50% solution. And that'll be for blocks where I know like, hey, for sure I will not have access or connectivity. And then the other times when, I'm deployed or I'm out on a fire season, it's kind of like a combo. Sometimes if I don't know where I'm going to be from week to week, like I'll pre-program 2 weeks. And then while I'm on the road, while we're in the crew vehicle, if we stop, at a hotel for a night, if I can get some service on my phone and hotspot my laptop, it really is figuring out as I go. And it means I sacrificed a lot of weekends, a lot of time when other guys are doing some fun stuff because I was like, I got a program for clients. So it just comes down to getting creative with, I've hot spotted off of McDonald's and like all kinds of stuff, figuring out ways to get connectivity. Um, but yeah, it just comes down to having the foresight to being figuring out how long you're going to be away for, if I'm going to be able to get connectivity, if not. And thankfully, I do have some other coaches now who can help share that load. I've already talked to them about something that's potentially come up in the future, going overseas again, and me being like, hey, if it falls through, can you guys kind of pick up the slack kind of thing, which is great.
One more thing for a question before I have to go. I saw that you did, it was like world's strongest military or like a strongest
Yeah.
military competition, and that looked like one of the most unique competitions I've ever seen.
It's
If you
called
want
World's
to talk about
Strongest
that,
Soldier, which is the most
world's strongest
badass thing
soldier.
ever. Like
I
that
was
is
like, dude,
Yeah.
what an
title.
absolute title. Like, what do you get when you win? Do you get like Thor's hammer or like,
We got some cool stuff. They gave us some cool stuff. That was in Finland. That was a really cool experience where um, I just happened to be considered for the invite. There's like a nice strongman network in the U.S. and I've been tied into kind of like the tactical strongman side of it because of some competition my friends run, and so my name popped up and got thrown into the hat, and that was a competition with military members from maybe like 8 or 9 different countries around the world. We met in Finland. It was a great crew, and it was definitely the most unique, like strongman um, style competition I've done because there was shooting, there was an obstacle course which actually had like a sandbag thrown into the end of it. You had to like load it over different height obstacles. There was some strongman events, obviously. There was like a combative event, like this big pole between the two of us, and we're trying to like push each other out of this ring. So that was really cool. I was really lucky to be able to get to do that, and I think it's going to be released on Finnish TV, both in Finnish and in English in this next month. So I'm keeping
oh,
my
that's
eye
sick.
out. I'm not allowed to talk about the placing yet, but it was really cool, and I think I got to represent the U.S. well, thankfully.
That's sick. Well, one of the things I did want to talk to you about, because there's a lot of power lifters that I work with that I really do
Yeah.
believe, like when I work with them, just giving them some sort of movement variability, like helps their training go through the roof. Like just getting them a little bit away from the like specificity of like the big three lifts that they're doing. And they always like, I feel so much better. Like I feel like not even like that the number is it's like they just talk about feeling stronger, right? And that's one of the like the cross training things where it seems like you have so many opportunities to cross train, not even by choice. It's just like by demand because of all the things that you're doing in life. Have you felt that has helped like your ability in strongman specifically and in like some of these competitions where it's like a lot of these guys I'm sure that you're facing like they're actually like specialized in these events and like going hard like just as straight up power lifters. Have you noticed a difference in like the real life strength in quotations, the functional strength as like kind of cringy as a word that is into like diminishing that nah like funneling that down into more of a specific competition. Like I even noticed it in simple things like starting up the Oli lifts this past year, like how much easier squats and deadlifts are, even just from doing Oli lifts, you know, just because like there's a tiny bit of skill in the Oli lifts compared to the other two where it's kind of just go up and down, right? And like it just makes it so much mentally easier and like there's way less of a I don't know, just like a thought process going into it. It's like, yeah, I can squat. Like and when it comes to the Oli lifts, there's one more piece of skill. And then when it comes to life and like other athletic abilities, obviously there's another piece of skill. So like, has that cross training helped a ton in like funneling it down and just how you're feeling and performing?
Oh, 100%. I mean, yeah, the transference effect that you get because you think about so yeah, to your point, talk about you work with a lot of powerlifters, and putting them on an off season where you incorporate some strongman movements, like that's gonna blow their numbers through the roof because
It's crazy.
yeah, their frame of reference maybe on like a squat is maybe that they're used to walking out say like a 600-pound squat or something, but then you bring them over to yoke carries, you add some yoke carries into their off season stuff, and now they're carrying 800-900 pounds. Now when they get under a 600-pound bar and unrack it, they're like, oh, like I've walked with 900 pounds. Like their amount of confidence handling that weight is going to go up. Because with strongmen you can do a lot of that like overload. If they're doing heavy farmers carries, the way that it's going to translate to their grip for their deadlifts. So yeah, absolutely. And having those dynamic movements, that real world strength, to the point, I think it just gives you so much more faith and confidence in your own athletic ability that just transfers to everything. I mean, I think I heard a good quote sometimes. Someone was like, if you want to get really strong at three lifts, really, really dialed and really, really technical, you do powerlifting. If you just want to be like strong motherfucker all around, like do strongman because you want to be strong in everything, do strongman. And I just think it's because it just translates incredibly well to situations you're going to see in everyday life. I mean, that's why I love it so much for military and firefighting. I mean, I've picked up and like shoulder, 350-pound sandbags. Like, hey, I know I can pick up my buddy if he goes down. I know I can pick him up and drag him. I know I'm going to throw him on my shoulder. For the fire thing, like I know I can pick up these logs and chuck them, and work for my Sawyer all day, that kind of stuff. So I just think it's such an important component, and it's really cool when you put it in people's programs and then just like the confidence it gives them or how you see it translate over to their other stuff is really awesome.
Yeah, dude, that confidence piece is so underrated. I feel like it's the
Mm-hmm.
way like because it's not like a necessarily like it's not like an objective piece of data. And like we can talk about like comparing like the 800-pound yoke walk to, but like there's something different about it. It's like something like I know I can do it versus like I have
Yeah,
to get stimmed the fuck up to do this. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like it's such a crazy. It's almost and
yeah,
it's also like a part of it just like raising your general physical preparedness, like your GPP, your basement. Like when you raise that, like it's like I want the athletes to be able to do this stuff not just on the days when everything is feeling amazing. Like any athlete can do it on the day when it's feeling amazing, but it's that confidence of like I can do it on a day when it's not feeling amazing. And maybe you traveled through three time zones to go compete in this like competition. You know what I mean? Like I think that's a
yeah.
much I don't know. Like having that confidence when you step on the platform it's really an important piece of a program that a lot of coaches don't think. They just drive up weight room numbers and they're like, okay, you're ready. It's like, okay, does that athlete feel ready, or did they just drive up the weight room numbers in their gym, in their perfect with their perfect bar, in their perfect situation, and now they have to drive to a certain spot or do something different or lift with a different barbell, and now they're super nervous and they don't know how to do it and they don't just feel great all the time.
That's such a good point, and I'm glad you brought it back up. Is the mental benefits you get from that kind of training? I mean, just And Josh Bryant, who's been my coach for a long time, Jailhouse Strong, he's got some great, input on just like the mental benefits of strongman. But yeah, I think there's something to be really said about like gutting out a really hard, like strongman medley where you're carrying like a farmer's or a yoke, or you're having to push for, max reps in a certain amount of time. That the mental benefit you get from understanding how to pace yourself and how to push through like pain and like all that kind of stuff. And then definitely to your point on how it puts you out of your little ecosystem, your little comfort zone that you've created. Like, hey, yeah, I know you can do this at your home gym or your garage gym, but like, yeah, now you got to go travel and compete. And that's the great thing about not just strongman, of course, but also some of these other tactical professions is just like getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, and then having the confidence that you can rise to the occasion. And the way you do that is because you put yourself in uncomfortable positions, in strain positions, like time after time after time. So you actually get confident with doing that. You're like, hey, no, I have this mental edge over these people because like maybe they've only done this in their little safe ecosystem, but like, hey, I've been here, I've done this, I've pushed myself through sleep deprivation or a crappy schedule or whatever it is. And you just, I mean, a good example of that, I was recently at sniper school, and very luckily we would get weekends off. 3 out of the 4 weekends of that month, I went and I competed. I drove to other states and I competed. You know what I mean? Like I did, and I like podiumed at all. I think I won maybe 2 of them, and then like podiumed at the other. Um, and that was like in a deficit of like body weight. I'd just been crawling around in the woods, doing sniper stuff, and then like I still gotta to make weight, or whatever it is. So and I would not have felt comfortable doing that, earlier in my career or earlier in my lifting career. But over time, you just accumulate those experiences, and that's why I tell people just to go out and make yourself be uncomfortable. Like, because some people say like, well, I don't want to compete. Yeah, I'm not strong enough. I'm like, hey man, if you have that mentality, you're never going to be strong enough. But if you just go out and you have the experience of competing, first of all, the community is like amazing and everyone's going to help you out. And the knowledge that you're going to gain about yourself and about the sport, whatever it is so much more useful than just saying to yourself, like, well, no, I need to put 20 more pounds on this lift before I'm good enough to go do it. I'm like, no, man, just go do it. You're going to get way much more out of that. And then the more you compete, the more you learn, the more confidence you build in yourself that you can do hard things. Like I can't stress the mental, the mental piece is so much more important than any physical piece that there is. I mean, the human body is capable of so much more. It doesn't really, almost doesn't even matter. Like if your mind is strong, it is crazy the things that you can make your body do. But you don't know until you expose yourself to those situations and actually embrace doing hard things just for the sake of doing hard things. Because I think the benefit you're going to get from that is far greater than having some perfect program that you followed to the T and you tracked all these things. I'm like, yes, there's enormous value in that if you're already at like the top level and you're trying to achieve something. But if you don't already have the mental tool set to take advantage of that, then the priority should be building the mental tools.
Yeah, dude, there's so many good points there. And it's kind of like that duality of like the confidence comes from competence, right? And
Yeah.
you have to prove the competence to yourself. Like so many athletes like, how do I'm nervous in the sport. I'm nervous I was like, you should be nervous. Like you're unprepared. You're unprepared. That's
Yeah.
why you're nervous, right? Like go prepare for yourself. And you talk about like going to do the test, like that's the only way to actually go, like the only way to get over being nervous is like go do the thing, go fail the thing or do well at it, like whatever it is, but you're going to prove it to yourself. And the test is going to give you so many more answers than the study guide that you're like trying to like master before you go and do it, right? Like there's so many times where it's like you go and do the test, okay? What did you fail at? What did you suck? Like it's going to expose everything that you had all these plans, you had all these ideas. Like you'll find out where you suck. You'll find out what you need to work
Yeah.
on in your next program once you go and test it. And I think it's very true in like the athletic world too, which is like a lot of the population of the like of the athletes that we train is like team sport athletes. It's like, go step up to the plate. Tell me where you suck. Like, let's stop talking about it before, but like, what couldn't you hit? What were you nervous about? Like, why were you anxious in there? And like, then we can prepare the program and we can challenge you in training so that competency can go up. But until you do that point, like, it's all fairy tales. It's all fairy tales we're telling ourselves.
Absolutely. And there's so much merit and value in the team sport side, and having that shared adversity and that shared suffering. Like, yeah, the stuff you get at team sports is incredible. It's the same, as the military and what have you. But yeah, you don't know until you start putting yourself out there and you start doing it.
And when you're like working through a lot of this stuff, you talked about like using the RPE system. And when
Mhm.
you're training with the strongman stuff, like because I use the RPE system a ton, and like the you talked about like body intuition and being able to like balance the mind versus the body. And I think you have the kind of two sides of this. You have the athlete that doesn't know how to push the body, and like a lot of that is like showing them visuals, like okay, you told me that was a 10 RPE. I'm showing you this is a 4 RPE. Like you need to push more. And then you have probably guys like you and me where it's like we want to just send to our old PRs and we have to like
Yeah.
be like, bro, that was a
Yeah.
10 RPE. That was not a 6 RPE. Like you're marking it down. What's your like process of educating an athlete and working with an athlete and maybe yourself too, of like being able to have something, maybe not objective, but like something along the lines where it like can work with that subjective and objective like data points that you have, to where like we're actually learning what we're capable of that day, and we're actually monitoring that. And obviously there's going to be undershoots and undershoots, overshoots and undershoots, but like how are you teaching people the RPE system? How are you teaching people to understand what their bodies are capable of? Because that's an argument like against the RPE system, and I think that's so stupid, because like, isn't the goal of training to teach people about their bodies, like to make them intuitive
100%.
about their bodies? Like that's a huge piece of training to me, is like I want them to be able to coach themselves if I'm not with them. You know what I mean? And I think that's a big piece
Yeah.
of just not having a sheet of paper in front of them. But how do you personally go about that process with your athletes and clients?
That's a great question, and there's no cookie cutter response to that. Like, it's not going to be the same for everyone, because athletes, as you know, are highly individual, and the way they perceive things are very different from one to the next. But the ways that can help in figuring out, where they are, where they think they are on the RPE scale, and where they actually are, is, there's a couple of resources you can give them. You can give them, of course, like the chart of like, hey, which, and relate it to different things. Because an RPE scale can also depend on like the intent of what your exercise is. Like the RPE scale for some of my Olympic lifts are going to be different than what I'm seeing there, different than like the power lifts or strongman. But if I'm trying to educate them on what the difference in like a 6 and a 10 feels like, something that can be really helpful is like inducing failure in a safe way, right? So, and then there's also the difference between like RPE with form breakdown, without form breakdown, because like I'm like, hey, I want you to uh, fail, but I want it to be a failure with good form. Like, I don't want form breakdown to occur in this exercise, because there's a difference between like, a gross like lower back rounded deadlift RPE 9, and then like an RPE 9 with good form. Like, those are very different on the scale. So ways that you can force them to get to that 9 or that 10, or experience what failure really feels like, but in a way that's not going to hurt them, or a way that they're going to understand like, oh, okay, that's what real failure feels like, and also like that, it's going to be so different through different classes of exercise. Like an RPE 10 on a bodybuilding exercise on like a machine, failure is going to be different than what like an Olympic lift failure looks like, because that's much more highly dependent on like the technical application, or what it looks like on a power lift, or like a running exercise. So yeah, really good, and really like layered question. And what it comes down to is, I think, understanding what you're trying to get out of that specific exercise, and then how the RPE scale changes for it, and then figuring out ways to educate that person. Usually it's usually I've found that like inducing failure in a safe way to give them a frame of reference, like, hey, this is your ceiling, and then like the complete, opposite side of that. It's like, hey, this is like zero effort for you. And then over time, they can kind of figure out what lies like in between there. But yeah, sometimes you see a video of your guy, you're like, yeah, man, that bar speed is incredible. That is not RP9,
Well, I like that too, is like drawing them to the extreme so they can kind of find the middle ground. And also the process of like teaching them what failure is, but also more so like the skill of like pushing. Like I think that's a skill that is it's not I don't want to say it's like mental tough. It's like because it sounds meatheadish, but it's like it's an actual skill to learn how to push your body in the weight room. And if you don't have that skill and you haven't been exposed to it, like it's not because you're a lazy athlete. Like you just don't know what that skill is. And you were talking about like teaching them how to fail under control. It made me think of this. I was climbing with my girlfriend and her friend the other day, and it was her friend's first time doing a bouldering thing, and she was like 3 feet off the wall, and she would refuse to like reach for anything that was dangerous, and she kept going like, I just need to fall for the first time to like get rid of that governor on my system, so like I know what falling is. Like I know I can do that, but I'm like, and like, yeah, just like jump off the wall and fall and like experience that failure for the first time. And I think the same can be said and kind of applied in the weight room, where it's like experience that extreme in a safe way, in like an understandable way. And I think that's part of being a good coach, is like getting them to understand what that extreme is and getting the feel falling off the wall, feel like what does failing feel like, and then we can draw it back in. But I really do believe that it's a skill, but it also takes like that governor off of a lot of the athletes once they get exposed to that.
Yeah, yeah, because it's to your point. That's so like cool and intuitive of your girlfriend's friend, I believe it was, to be like to recognize like I can't hit this next step until I just get this thing out of the way. I get this failure piece out of the way, and then once I've experienced it, I know I'll be able to move past that. And that's like a perfect example, kind of like of auto regulation and understanding, like where that limit lies. And yeah, that's like a tricky balance with athletes. Like a good example, you've probably seen this before, is when someone's doing say like a max effort like box jump, and then they eat it, right? Uh the mental barrier it then takes to like you almost can't even like rest. You'd be like, okay, like, hey, immediately like aggressively reattack that. Like maybe we adjust like the height to give you success again, because you'll see people like create that mental block. Plyos is always like a big one with it, but or it could be like a weight on a bar, a certain weight. Because yeah, the mental piece of having, and real great athletes have very short memories, right? Like they will experience failure, and the best ones like take the lesson from the failure, but then they almost forget about it. They remember the lesson, but they forget about the failure itself. Because if you have an athlete who's fixated on doing that thing wrong again, or that builds up that fear in their head, like that can kind of be like a crippling effect. But really great athletes, like they'll forget they even made some mistakes. Like they'll make the correction and know not to do it again. But you'll tell like, oh yeah, you did this. They're like, what? Like I don't remember doing that. And that's actually a sign of like a kind of like a good. It can be a sign of like a good athlete, because I'm like, oh nice. He's not focused on the fact that he messed that up. He just learned the lesson of what he has to correct, but he's not gonna beat himself up for the error.
Yeah, I just watched a funny reel where it was the NHL pro just talking about like they were asking him like what the best mindset to be like a good hockey player was, and he's like, just be stupid, dude.
Yeah,
he's like, the more I get hit in the head, the better hockey
yeah,
player I am, because I think way less on the
yeah,
ice. I'm like, you got a point. Like there's some bark to that. That is
yeah.
true.
I mean, hey, and the same thing true in the weight room. Like you get these people who get so wrapped up in all the variables and like the science and whatever, and I'm just like, hey man, just shut up and like lift that bar. Like just like like, hey, you're a smart person. I get it. Like just be dumb for a second and just like all you gotta do is move that weight aggressively and like stop overthinking about all these things. Like just go fucking lift that weight, man. Like go lift stupid for a second, and I guarantee you get stronger.
Yeah, dude, that'll be the title of the podcast right there. Speaking on lifting heavy shit. One of the things that I thought was super dope was you and your stone lifts. And I specifically I really liked your post talking about the travel to the stones and thinking about people that have lifted
Mm,
the stones before you and the culture of strength. And you talked about even earlier where like you were exposed to some of the books where you're like, oh, this is how strength conditioning got brought over to America. And I just think it would be a like cool conversation to just hear your thoughts on like the culture of strength and what that has meant and how that has grown and how that's different in different places that you've visited and how you can like again take those lessons of okay, this is strength here, this is what strength means here, this is what strength was in the past, and how you can take all of those lessons. Because I think we are really at a point in like our age of information where we think we are like the smartest people in the world, and it's like we are missing so many pieces of it. Like we just write on, and I think this is humans for a long time. Like we always just think we're at the like peak and we're always the smartest. And it's like in 100 years, we're gonna look so stupid. Like you guys know that, right?
oh
Like
yeah.
we're acting so smart right now. We're gonna look so stupid. Like, and I think there's so many lessons from the past and just from different cultures of strength conditioning that you can learn from. But I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on that and some of the lessons that you've learned through that, like that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest takeaway that I've seen and learned from that is strength is universal and it always has been. There's always been this innate human desire to test ourselves. And one of the foundational ways that I've kind of seen a common thread amongst a lot of societies is, just like the lifting of heavy objects, right? And what's something that's always been around? Well, these stones, people have figured out this these series of things to test them on because there's famous lifting stones pretty much every continent, pretty much every culture, and some of the more famous ones are the Icelandic lifting stones, which I've been fortunate enough to kind of I've traveled around Iceland with my fiance. I've lifted a lot of them. There's of course a lot in Scotland. There's a lot in Ireland. Um, there's some in Scandinavia. But in Iceland specifically, I'll talk about that, and then I might talk about Scotland as well. In Iceland specifically, there was like they're called the Drittvik stones, and they're down on this beach. And there's four stones, I believe, and they used to use it as a because the Icelandic fishermen, at the time, they would use it as a way to test their strength and to kind of like prove, their physical ability for like the oncoming, work that had to be done, working on the fishing vessels. And if you could lift the heaviest stone, then you got more of a share of like the money because it
Mm.
demonstrated more ability. So now I'm demonstrating like value, through my strength, which is promoting like, the pursuit of something more. And then like the incredible part about those stones out there, there's also the Husafell out there, which the legend between that one is that it's like this sheep pen. And it's this almost triangular looking stone that you have to pick up and you have to walk around this stone sheep pen that was built by a priest and his daughter. And the legend is that she picked this thing up and walked all the way around. It's just over 400 pounds. So it's an incredible physical feat. You imagine the kind of the woman who was doing this, but um, the most incredible thing now, and I've been really fortunate to have been there for some of them. I'm going to give a shout out to my friend Sandra Bradley, who's probably the best female stone lifter in the world right now. I was because there's all this recorded history of typically this culture being for men, right? Except for the Husafel, but uh, Sandra, I was lucky to be there. So she's the first woman in recorded history to lift that to chest, which is she picked it and was able to extend it and stand it, and the thing that I learned so much from watching her do that because we went there together, and from the time we got there to her doing it was about 2 hours, and I ended up doing it before her, but it was only because I was watching the way that she was approaching it and like maneuvering her body, and she was very methodical and like scientific in her approach and like understanding like her limb length because she started in almost like a upright fetal position where her legs were like flat against the ground, and so she could get as close to the stone as possible and then like stretch her arms all the way out to get like a long pick, and then from there she transitioned to like a squat position, was able to pick it into her lap and then extend it. And the amount I learned just shows how much you can learn from people of, different builds or different abilities. Like I learned more from watching her do stone lifting than I would have if I had just, I never would have thought to go out there and look at something for 2 hours, toying with it, seeing what felt good, what did it, before being able to do that. You know what I mean? And I took so much away from that. But like, that was history in the making that I witnessed because that's crazy. And for me, it was a big deal doing it myself because you think about the amount of people who have been to those specific stones because they've luckily been preserved and the strength culture has made sure that they're taken care of. You think about the amount of people throughout history who have gone there, who have lifted or attempted to lift it, and like you touch that thing and you're like, how many people did I just like connect to throughout however many like hundreds of years? Like this stone has remained the same. People have come and gone and they've used this as a way to compete and measure themselves and prove something to themselves, to answer questions about themselves. And I think that's just such a cool common thread because you see that on almost like every culture. Like we have ways of doing that in every culture. And stone lifting is just like one of the most primal ways of doing it. Like there's an incredible amount of like famous stones. It sounds silly, but there's these famous stones all around the world that have names, that have history behind them. And so I count myself incredibly lucky to have been involved and have lifted some of these and seen, history being made with my friend Sunny, with Sandra. And then my other friend Nancy is like the first woman to pick it and actually take steps, like walking steps with the Husafell, which is, that heavier than 400-pound stone. Like that's stuff that's never been done before. And then, my friend Sunny and Leifa they opened the door for all that when they showed that it could be done. Because before
Like a
that,
4 minute mile.
like a lot, yeah, yeah, exactly. Like as soon as some women started seeing that, like, oh, hey, look, this is possible. Now it's already being progressed, and there's no doubt in my mind that the day is soon coming where a woman picks it and walks it for the entire length of the sheep pen. And I think like the guy who holds the world record for it is Patty, and I think he did it like 3.5 laps, something crazy. But if you go on YouTube and you watch like the Husafell, and it's an insane feat of physical strength, and to see the way that it's just getting pushed further and further and further is like absolutely disgusting. It's because having felt it myself and then seeing what other people are doing, I'm like, that's crazy.
Well, it's also kind of badass to kind of think about like how culture drives like performance too. And like I don't think that's like talked enough about, but it's like that rite of passage to become a physically fit enough person to pick up the stone, and then you get a reward for it with like the bigger share. And in the strength conditioning world, and what we struggle with, especially in like America, where it's like the obesity pandemic, it's like, okay, like, do we need to shift what our culture focuses on to drive performance there, to have like some sort of rite of passage, some sort of ability to like prove that to where there's a reason for doing it, right? Like, I do believe there's power in having a purpose and connection to movements that I think we kill a lot when it comes to like the right way to train or the science-based way to train. And it's so dumb because you don't have to kill like you don't have to go back to just only picking up stones. Like you can keep all of the science that we're doing and you can use that science to gamify everything we do. But I think we have lost the art of like having a purpose to move and having a purpose to train.
Yeah.
And if you're a top level athlete, obviously there's a purpose to train. There's millions of dollars to go be made, and that like incentivizes a lot of people to go do that. But for the people that are not top level athletes and they find out real quick in middle school or high school that they're not a top level athlete, like what is our connection? What is our cultural connection to movement and training? And I think we can do just a much better job of it rather than just force plating them and like velo bar tracking them to death.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're bringing up a lot of like deep societal kind of questions and things that we've lost by, because we've made things, we're in an age now where we've made everything extremely easy for ourselves. And so, where in the past it was so important to have physical health and physical capacity because it was necessary, it was necessary for survival. It was necessary to support your family. Now we're in the age where, best time to be alive. We don't have to deal with a lot of famine and disease and a lot of things that we have had to in the past. But at the same time, because we don't have as much hardship in our life, we've also lost connection with a lot of things that are just important for human beings to do. Like we've lost our connection to nature. We've forgotten how important it is to go to bed when, like the sun sets and, all these kind of things. And yeah, that's a great question on like, what do we need to change culturally in order to, you know, show the importance of health and fitness and function again. And it comes down to a lot of just understanding where that problem is in and of itself and just remembering like, our technology has so far outpaced like our little monkey brains, and that at the end of the day, we're still humans and we still need human stuff. We still need sunlight. We still need, water and good food, and to like sleep at regular times and all this other crap that we've invented, which is great, but, distracts us from all that is, you know, it's a hard question figuring out like what can we change culturally to show why it's important to do these things, because I think it should be more than just the motivation of earning money as an athlete, right? I think like the fundamental question of just answering things about yourself by challenging yourself, both physically and mentally, is so important, you know? Like I think that in and of itself should be the motivation just to get out and be active and healthy and fit. But not everyone obviously feels the same way, and because it's easy for the people who care about it to go do it, because you already intrinsically understand why it's important, because of how good it makes you feel, because of what you learn about yourself, because having hardship and challenge in our life is important for our personal development, etc. But until you get someone started and experiencing those things, it can be hard to like get them to see the value in it.
Yeah, dude, that made me think of like Naval's quote about like, if you're so smart, why aren't you happy? And I think a lot of that is
Yeah.
because you're not taking care. Like, you're so smart, you're avoiding the monkey side of you that is like,
Yeah.
it needs these things. You know what I mean? And you can be as smart as you want, you're still going to need those things. And until you give yourself those things, you're gonna feel like shit all day. If you feel like shit all day, your mind's gonna feel like
Yeah.
shit all day. Like, I don't know, that just triggered that thought process. But
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you what is like, if you're working with an athlete, like we have a lot of young high school athletes that trying to get into like understanding these things and doing these things. When you're working with somebody like that, like what is your process to start getting them to understand that? Is it proving it to themselves with like hard workouts or like challenging things and proving like showing them progress in what they're doing? Like how are you taking that and starting that process? Obviously, you can't control that like there's some people that have it and there's some people that don't, and I really don't believe you can force that in a person. Like they got to find that within themselves. But I also, on the
Yeah.
other hand, do believe you can provide a space in which they have a higher percent chance of finding that in like within themselves. What's
Yeah.
kind of your process of doing that with an athlete?
Yeah. I think just the point of, I mean, the fact alone that someone is reaching out to me and asking about receiving coaching and training is already telling me a lot. It's already telling me that they've thought through some of these things in some way, shape, or form. They are wanting to take ownership of their life and they are wanting to get better, right? So in that sense, they've already done a lot of the work for themselves, by even seeking me out. And I work with a lot of tactical athletes, which is police, fire, military. And so there's the compounded interest of them wanting to perform well for their job because a lot of people are also depending on them. But to your great point of just creating a space for them in order to experience that progression, right? And that's, providing them with some good programming to induce some of that kind of like artificial hardship or challenge to show them like, hey, yeah, you can do hard things. Once you do those hard things, you will see the benefits that they have, like both mentally and physically. I mean, like, the amount of times people get back to you and they're like, providing them with consistency and accountability, and someone gets back to you, they're like, I've never felt so good. These other good things are happening in my life because, I have this constant in my life, this structure. Humans, we do incredibly when we have structure and accountability. And yeah, just providing someone that space to grow, to give them that structure, to hold them accountable, that in and of itself is just going to have so many benefits.
Dude, and what a time to be alive where we're talking about how to apply artificial hardships. Like,
Yeah, right.
fucking
Yeah, that's
insane.
that's the crazy thing. Yeah, it's we've made life so easy for ourselves that we have to create hardship in order to learn, things that we should be learning intuitively. But, that's just kind of like where we're at right now. In different ways. There's, people are dealing with hardship these days in very different ways than we have in the past. So it's not to say that people don't have any hardship. It's just in different ways. And I think the hardships they can benefit from have been taken away from them. And so you have to kind of create some of those now.
Absolutely, dude. Well, I appreciate you coming on and ripping with me, man. This was dope. This was an awesome podcast. Yeah,
man, I had a great time. Thank you so much for your time and having me on. It's an honor to talk to you guys, and I think you guys it can't be stated enough. You guys are doing some great work and you're helping a lot of people, and that's, at the end of the day, that's really the only thing that matters is giving back to the people around us and making sure they're set up for life.
Hell yeah. And where are you competing at this weekend?
I'll be competing in Las Vegas at America's Strongest Veteran. I'm actually competing with my buddy who just got out of the Army. Even though I'm still in the Army, I'm a Marine veteran, so I can still compete as a veteran. So yeah, I'll be in Las Vegas this weekend, and then in November I'll be in Texas for OSG, which is like World's Strongest Man for weight class athletes. Because I'm only a little guy. I'm not this big 400-pound monster. You probably can't tell.
well, good luck, dude.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you.
Thank you guys for listening. Keep chopping wood.
Thank you for listening. Join us next week as we dive down another rabbit hole. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star rating. Follow us on Instagram at Austin Yoakum to stay updated on future podcast guests. Keep chopping wood.